you everyone for coming along today. So we'll spend the next 10 minutes or so discussing learning in the outdoors in terms of the toolkits that we've created over the last 3 years with some fantastic partners. So we'll briefly introduce outdoor learning because sometimes there can be a little bit of confusion about where it exactly sits. And then we'll discuss these toolkits before we move into some other projects that we're currently working on. So as was done at the start, I think it's really important that we do state that we respectfully acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land. As you can see there, for the important and enduring role that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples play in Australia regarding the land, water and sky used for learning in the outdoors. It's a critical component of what we do, and you'll see that it's a part of these toolkits that we'll talk about today as well. So just a brief background about me that I chucked in. So I've been at OV now for about 5 years, doing all things outdoor learning or whatever job Andrew or Robin throw at me. I'm currently in the US doing a PhD in lecturing in outdoor learning. So hoping I can bring some of that perspective for what we're doing here in the US in this space to what we're doing in Australia as well. So we'll go over a bit of an introduction to outdoor learning. We'll do a little bit of an overview on the toolkits and then actually look at some practical applications for toolkits, which I think is one of the critical components of any good resource. There actually has to be a way of how do we actually use this on a day-to-day basis. So when we look at what is outdoor learning, now it does sit in terms of one of the 7 curriculum connections of the Australian curriculum. So it is already a part of the curriculum. It is something that a lot of schools don't necessarily look at, but you can see that it sits with consumer and financial literacy, food and fiber, multimedia, online safety, respect, food, and there's also outdoor learning. So this draws upon a whole range of connections from anywhere between foundation to year 10, with the general idea of getting kids outdoors. Now, it doesn't always have to specifically relate to things such as PE, which a lot of teachers would automatically think, take the kids out to do PE, that counts as outdoor learning. Outdoor learning can be applied across the whole curriculum, be that if you're in a history classroom, science classroom, if you're doing art, if you're doing maths, whatever it may be, you can use outdoor learning for students to gain unique and sort of specific benefits in addition to what you're teaching. So how did we get to where we are today with outdoor learning? So it has sort of had a varied past, which for some of you, you might know outdoor learning as something a little bit different, but the general sort of history is we started off with nature study in the early 1900s. We then progressed through to character building, which is a lot to do with sort of scouts and YMCA groups and sort of those community building and character building groups. Transition through to outdoor education, which is typically a little bit more focused on recreation activities, not always, but a little bit more to do with, like, say, climbing, kayaking, bushwalking. And now we're sort of at outdoor learning where we're not necessarily relying on a specific activity to teach and to help us teach. It's more about using the environment as a whole to enhance our existing outcomes. So in 2018, we received funding from the Strategic Partnership Program in combination with GTAV, which is the Geography Teachers Association of Victoria, Parks Victoria, EVE, which is the Environmental Education Victoria, and ACHPA, in combination with a range of other fantastic partners that we've worked with, to come up with some toolkits for teachers to actually implement this outdoor learning. So look at what it is and provide some good resources that teachers can pick up a document and see where this fits within their class and within the curriculum. So the 15 toolkits that we've completed over the last 3 years, so they start off with an introduction. So we look at what is outdoor learning, what are the research benefits of outdoor learning, how we actually do it. We then progress into a range of different environments. So we've got water-based environments, school, ground, and urban environments. And then we look at particular subject areas. So we've got geography, history, health, PE, science, visual arts, reading, writing, speaking, listening, mathematics, and also how we can embed this with Indigenous cultures. So a wide range of these, and we're also adding in 2 more currently. So we're looking at music education, we're looking at Auslan, and we're also looking at LOTE. So we're adding a few more that we found that we felt that we were missing, that we could improve in that area as well. So when we look at what is included in each of these 15 toolkits, there's a section on the benefits of why we want to integrate it with that specific area. There's the connection back to the environment and where that's sort of come from and the history of it. We'll provide tips to embedding these activities into your classroom. And then each activity does have a Victorian curriculum linked to it. You could apply it to Australian curriculum as well. They are pretty close, but at times it's more focused on Victoria, but you could certainly use it if you're in another state as well. There's resources, the equipment and materials that you need to enact that particular activity, and also some extension activities. So there's all this information for every activity, and each toolkit typically has between 10 and 15 activities associated with it. So in the introduction toolkits, they'll have tips to consider when planning. So this is things such as how to consider your school needs, the environment of what your school is in, the curriculum that you're using, training, equipment, how we ensure that we're having fun, because that's really an important aspect of school, is that there's the learning, but we also need students to be enjoying themselves as well as learning. There's a whole bunch of researched outcomes. So you can click on these links and it will take you to where it states that outdoor learning promotes better mental health, improved grades, outdoor learning schools, attitudes towards the environment, or increased motivation. And there's pages and pages of these. The reason why we included these, it's important to know what we're doing, but also if you're pitching this to leadership, you can go to them and say, here's a whole range of really good benefits to why we should embed outdoor learning within our classrooms. One of the stats that shocked me the most when I was creating these documents, these introduction ones, is that 1 generation ago, 73% of children's playtime was spent outdoors, and now it's 13%. So that's 60% down in just 1 generation. So you can think about that is a huge amount. So as a result, I think that school has the opportunity to take up a little bit of that slack. School does so many things, but I think we have the opportunity to introduce some of these outdoor environments within school to try and balance out those numbers a little bit more. And you can see there on the right-hand side, some questions to consider when planning. So these are things such as what the particular environment that you've got, what is easily accessed, what is the proposed learning context, and what environment that you're in. So if you're in an urban environment, your outdoor learning program might be a bit different to if you're in Ballarat and you've got bush behind you and you can access that a lot more easily. So each document will start off with an embedding tips. So this will talk about the connection between, as you can see in this one, outdoor learning and geography. So we'll give you a bit of a brief background to why we've chosen to discuss that particular toolkit, and just sort of give you some general information about them. Now, over those 15 toolkits, there's over 250 activities. So I'm not going to go into these activities in great depth, but I'm just going to show you some examples of what they look like, just so you can become familiar with them. I see that Robin has fantastically put the link to these in the chat. So feel free to have a look at these as well. I'll just sort of touch on the surface, but you're more than welcome to look in depth. And if you do have any questions, feel free to ask me or email any one of the team. So this is an example of a geography activity. This one's looking about if it rains, or you can use water bottles, where is the flow of the land? So students can put leaves in the water and see, does it flow down? Where does it flow? They can track the flow. There's a whole bunch of questions and activity sheets that come along with it that students can see, well, when it rains, it's got to go somewhere. Where does this actually go? So that's an example of a geography-based activity. This is a history one. This is about visiting a local cemetery. So we had a few people were sort of a little bit iffy about this, but we've received some great emails over the last couple of years about that this activity can be a really good one for a lot of students. So there's elements we have to be aware of and careful of, and it does unpack those within the document, but just something that some people may not have considered as a part of history and also outdoor learning. An example of an urban activity is urban tree mapping. So going down to the CBD and looking at where the trees are, where does the sunlight come from for those trees? How do they get watered? What is the connection between, say, the local council and those trees? Melbourne's one of the few places in the world that actually has names for their trees, and you can send them an email through Wi-Fi. So it's a weird concept, but you can email trees, you can take pictures of them, and it allows Parks Victoria to track the growth of those trees and how those trees are going. So that's a really fun little activity. Sustainability, we can look at energy audits. So having students go around the school, looking at energy, where's it being used, how much is being used, how can they reduce some of that energy, and then they put it into a worksheet, they present it back to the class. Another example of a sustainability activity. Maths kebabs. So this one is students grab a stick, they grab a whole bunch of different leaves, and they order those leaves in different colors, in different shapes, in different amounts. So this can tie back to maths, but also a range of other subjects. So you can see here that all these activities have links back to the curriculum and also have the equipment and materials there as well. This is another example of maths. This is looking at tree trunks. So thinking of your body like a tree trunk, where your trunk and legs, your branches are your arms, twigs are your fingers and your feet, and sort of building from that through some interesting discussion questions. With that one, you don't need any materials other than having trees, which hopefully we all have. Now, over the 3 years that we've had these, we've been able to see that they have been accessed from all over the world. So we've been able to track this through a lot of emails that we've received from a lot of people. So they haven't just been used sort of in Victoria or in Australia. You can see on the map that they've sort of been used on a global scale, which is fantastic. We think the more we can do for outdoor learning, the better that it is. So at the moment, we're currently drafting 2 new primary school toolkits, and we're also starting the process of 15 toolkits for secondary schools. So we'll be looking at many of the same concepts that we've discussed that we did for primary. But if you have any interest in being involved in helping us with the secondary toolkits, please feel free to reach out to me. I've put my email there, and I'm sure we'll share a copy of these slides as well. Feel free to email me, and I'm happy to have more help and assistance and hear your thoughts on how we can embed outdoor learning within the secondary context. Or if you even have activities on the primary version, we're happy to hear those, and we can always embed those as well.